Hello everyone, this is lesson number 3 of my video series involving music theory for drummers. This lesson will deal with chord voicings. A lot of you have asked me for this particular video because it shows you how to voice chords when you're playing jazz. In other words, if you pick up a real book, which are all the jazz tunes in there, you'll be able to voice the chords and then hear them as a drummer. And when you're playing in the jazz group as a drummer, you need to be able to hear these kinds of chords so you know where you are in the tune. And also if you want to do any kind of composition, improvisation, you need this. So this will be a very long video, and I may have to divide it up into 2 videos because there's a lot to cover. So let's start out with a little bit of a review. If you remember, in the first video we talked about the basics, the notes, and the intervals. And then the second video we talked about chords, triads, and basic 7th chords. So you definitely have to watch both of those before you dive into this one. Otherwise you will not know what's going on, okay? Now we'll be holding 4 mallets throughout most of this video. Again, I put it in the description, but the grip I use is a Musser Stevens grip. And you're welcome to use any grip you want. I'll list a few books in the description that you can get. And maybe I'll do a separate video on 4 mallet grips, but there's about 100 of those on YouTube. Just make sure you choose a professional who's demonstrating it. So let's start out with what we talked about in lesson number 2, which are 7th chords. That will be our basis for this. And we'll just use C as we've been using. If you remember, C minor 7 sounds like this. So we have the root, the minor 3rd, the 5th, and the 7. So what we need to do is we need to move around those notes so we're not playing in root position. So a good example of that would be just starting on that 3, the minor 3, which is an E flat, and just moving it up 1 inversion like this, or this. So you can start on the 3rd and the 7th. And if you remember from that last video, the chord video, we talked about guide tones. So those are always going to be the 3rd and the 7th of whatever type of chord you're playing in. So this is a minor chord. So the 3rd in C minor would be E flat, and the 7th would be B flat. And those are our guide tones. That tells you what the chord is. So if I play the root, and then I play the guide tones, we know we're in minor. And you can just chord with 2 mallets. Milt Jackson was famous for doing that. He rarely used 4 mallets. He would just play chords with 2 mallets, and the chords would consist of 2 notes in that case, obviously. Or he would do little arpeggios. He was a master of that, so I definitely recommend listening to him in all aspects of vibraphone playing. So we have our guide tones. Now, what we want to do is add some other notes to that minor chord. So that root is not necessary unless you're playing solo vibes. In other words, if you're by yourself, you want to lay down that root, which would be C. Okay, play a little B in there. And once you lay that down, that bass, you hear what the actual chord is. It's common for a chord to sound like something it's not. So what I mean by that is in C minor, if you play an E flat major chord over C, that becomes C minor 9. But we wouldn't know that unless we played the C in the bass. So if we just play this, that is literally E flat major 7. But if we put the C in the bass and play that E flat major 7 on top, we have our C minor 9. That's one of those little tricks you can use, but you should know these, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So the 9 is the D. That's the same as playing the 2. So C, D, or above it is the 9, C, D, 9. We call them 9s. We don't normally call them 2s. So you'd say C minor 9, not C minor 2. So a C minor 9 starting on the minor third is this. So it's E flat, which is the minor third, the fifth, which is G, okay, the B flat, which is the minor 7, and the D, instead of the C, which was the root, the D is the 9. Now you can invert that, in other words, play it differently by starting on the 7, the B flat. And in this case, we have a little bit of a rub. So we'd play this. So now we have a minor second in there, the D and the E flat. So that's a little more dissonant voicing. They sound great. It's just you have two choices for C minor 9. You can do this or this. So you can start on the third or the seventh, and that goes for all of your voicings. Now, sometimes I like to use a little bit of a different voicing, so I'll show you what that sounds like. If we play a C in the bass like this, then we go here. So it's going to be the 7, the B flat, the minor third, the sus, which is the F, the 4, and then the 9, which is the D. So undoubtedly you've heard these chords in several styles of music. If you listen to impressionistic music from France, from the early 1900s, Ravel, Debussy, Poulenc, you're hearing this stuff. Stravinsky, they were really fond of these chords. It's just beautiful music. And a lot of times it's orchestrated throughout the strings and the winds and the whole orchestra. And especially Ravel was just a master of orchestration. So you could listen to some of his pieces and hear these chords. Modern jazz, though, uses these quite a bit. If you go back and listen to the Ralph Towner, Gary Burton ECM records from the 70s, and then, of course, Gary Burton. Mike Minieri is another vibraphonist who uses these voicings a lot from Steps Ahead. These open kinds of voicings that involve susses and different qualities of chords on the vibes. This is something you definitely want to explore. So it's very, very colorful. Again. So you hear that kind of floaty, airy, mysterious sound. Next, we go to our dominant voicings. So if you remember again from the last video, the chord, 7th chord video, a dominant chord is a major chord with a minor 7. So C dominant sounds like this. And that's the 5 chord. All right? So it would be written C7 in most cases. Now, the guide tones to that, again, are going to be the 3rd and the 7th. So in this case, instead of E flat, we're going to go E natural. So this. So that's the guide tones to a C dominant 7 chord. All right? B flat and E natural. I personally like 13th chords. So in other words, instead of a C7 or C9, it would be a C13. The 13 is the same as the 6. Lots of pianists, and especially Bill Evans, if you ever listen to him, he uses these kinds of voicings where you're using that 13. So it adds a ton of color to the sound of the vibe. It's very dark. So that's a C13, okay? And let me tell you why. So we're starting on the 7, all right, the minor 7, so it's B flat. And then the D is the 9. And then the E is the 3rd. And then the A is what's on top. the 13. So it sounds like this. Now, if I lower that A to one note, then we have a C dominant 9. But this to me has a lot more character. So that's a C dominant 13 chord starting on the 7. Now you can also start that chord on the major third, which sounds like this. Okay, so it's going to be C to E, which is the major third. Then you're going to play the 13, the A, and you're going to do that minor second rub again with a B flat, and then your D, which is your 9. Now on vibes, these are a little tricky to play because you got to do a little contortion kind of thing going on there. On piano, they're quite a bit easier to play. So I'll use these a little less for dominant chords than the spaced out one I showed you. But that is a C dominant 13. As opposed to the voicing that started on the 7, which is this. Okay? But it's handy because as you're moving up the instrument, you could play these different inversions. And that's all it is an inversion. So another option would be a spread out chord played in fourths. So let me show you this. You're doing B flat, E natural, and then A and D like this. So again, that kind of goes with our C11 sound. That's we did for the minor chords. It's a little more open. And of course, an inversion of that would be this. So once again, that's C13, but inverted. So those are all good options for playing dominant chords. Now let's go to major. And if we look at our major chords, remember what we did for the previous video. A C major 7 would be C, E, G, and B natural. So if you have that, then the guide tones are going to be B and E. Once again, that's your 3rd and your 7th. Now I really like C major 9 chords. You could play the 13, which would be the 6. That's a C major 6. You can do that. That would also be the A. And those are common. You'll see those in the real book or chord things. But normally, the C major are going to be just 9 chords. So what that is, it's basically a minor triad on top of C, like this. That's one way to think about it, okay? So what that is, it's going to be a C, an E, a G, and a B, but you're going to add the 9. So the 9 is D, all right? So one voicing of C major 9 is this. So it's B, D, E, and G. All right? Another one, which you'd bring it up to the E, which is the 3rd, is this. So you could start on the 7 or the 3. Again, that's very handy when you're going all over the keyboard and your voice leading needs to be close. So you can do a C major 13 or C major 6, as I just said. In that case, that's spread out like this. And once again, those are in fourths. All right, and you can invert that starting on the 3rd or the 7th. So you have that option as well. Adds a little color. Now I just have to say, if you're playing with a guitar player or a pianist and you're playing vibes with them, you got to be really careful because you guys can clash. Guitar and vibes is a really great sound together. Piano and vibes can be rough because the piano covers so much tonality that you can easily, get in each other's way. So just be real sympathetic to how you're doing that. Guitar by nature is in fourths, so their voicings are going to be open They can be open. So it really sounds great with vibes a lot of times. But just be careful to make sure you're playing the same kinds of chords, or else you can get into some pretty heavy dissonance. So let's try applying these to a 2-5-1 progression. So the 2 chord is going to be minor, the 5 chord is going to be dominant, and the 1 chord is going to be major. So again, if we're in C major, the 2 chords going to be D minor 9, the 5 chord will be G 13, and the 1 chord would be C major 9 with the voicings that I just showed you. So let's show you how that works. And the goal is to have minimum mallet movement. So that's called voice leading. And you want your voice leading to be close, so you're not jumping all over the keyboard. Many times you'll be comping really quickly, and so you don't have time to do that. So to get from minor to dominant, you want to just move as little as possible. So I'll show you how to do that. So a D minor 9 starting on the 3rd, which is F, sounds like this. So those chord tones are the 3rd of D, all right, the 5th, which is A, the 7, which is C, and the 9, which is E. So we have an F, an A, a C, and an E in D minor, okay? Now, G13, a voicing of that starting on the 7th would be, once again, an F is the 7 of G13. And then we would play the 9, which is an A. And then we would play the 3, okay, which is B. And then we would play the 13, which is E. So here's those notes spread out. So essentially all I'm doing to get from D minor 9 to G13 is I'm moving one note, and that's the C to the B. And that D minor 9 is starting on the 3rd, and the G13 is starting on the 7. Okay, once again, because this is kind of hard to understand a little bit, we have in D minor F, A, C, and E, and in G13 we have F, A, B, and E. So we're just moving one note. Threw the F in there. All right, so that's your 2-5. Now we have our 1 chord, which, as we already established a minute ago, that's E, G, B, and D. So that's also really close. You got to do a little more movement. So let's put all those together. We have D minor 9 to G13 to C9. And that's a 2-5-1 progression, voiced in a pretty musical jazz way. Once again, Bill Evans, the great pianist, used a lot of these kinds of voicings. So I'll play for you one more time. Okay, so there I was jumping from the minor to the major, and then the minor to the 5 to the major, just comping. And that's what they call it when the pianist and even the drummer plays behind a soloist. So you're comping those chords short, long, in different rhythmic groupings. And we'll probably do another video on that when we start playing some real book jazz tunes, so I can show you how to do that. So let's show you another voicing. So there I started on my 3rd for the minor, the 7 for the dominant, and again the 3rd for the major. What if we reverse that? D minor, C, E, F, and A All right, and then we just move one note again, this time to the B, and that's our G13. So B, E, F, and A, and then we just shift down to our major. And that's B, D, E, and G. So when that's a little faster, it's 2-5-1 in C major with a different voicing. So this time I started my minor chord on the 7th, and the previous time I started on the 3rd. So let me play you both of those back to back slowly. So here's D minor with a more open voicing. So we're starting on the 3rd. G13 and C major. And here's the alternate voicing. We're starting now on the 7 in the D minor. So you see how one's lower, one's higher. So using these two kinds of voicings, anywhere you are on the keyboard, there's a voicing right near where you are. So instead of jumping around, if you have the 3rd and the 7th as notes you're starting on, you'll never be stuck in one particular area where you have to jump to get your chord. So that's why it's so vital that you learn both of these types of voicings. So until now, we've been just doing C major to keep it simple. But what I want to do is play through some 2-5-1s for you in several different keys. And what I'll do is I'll do them slow and then call them out. So we'll start with what we just did, but I'll play it in consecutive order here. So it's a 2-5-1 in C major. So we'll start on the 3rd, and this is the 2 chord, D minor 9. Move that one note, so from a C to a B, and we get G13. And then we move down to the C major 9. The upper voicing of that, which starts on the 7th, would be D minor 9. And now we move from the C to the B, and we get G13. And then we have C major 9. Now in the key of B flat major, the 2 chord is C minor 9. So we'll start out with the voicing on the 3rd, that's E flat, and that sounds like this. And we move one note, the B flat, to the A, and that gives us an F13, which is the 5 chord, and now the 1 chord, which is B flat major 9. Now the upper voicing for that is a little tight here, a little tricky. Remember, we have that little minor second rub. So C minor 9, and move the B flat to the A, and then we have B flat major 9. How about A flat major? So we start out again on the 3rd, which is D flat in a B flat minor chord. Then that's the 2 chord in A flat major. So that sounds like this. And then we take our A flat, move that down to G, and then we have E flat 13, which is the 5 chord in A flat major. And then we have A flat major 9. And the upper voicing for that is this, B flat minor 9. We move our A flat to G. We have E flat 13, and then we go to our A flat major 9. So some of these are a little trickier than others because it's a little bit of a contortionist stance there when you have to get really close. So that's an example of some more voicings. And of course, in every key, we could be here for an hour, so we won't do that, but you need to practice them in every key. And if you do that with your 2-5-1s and you memorize them, like I have them memorized, you can pretty much play any chord that you see. And we're going to talk about some altered chords in another video, but just really quickly, let's say you had a C minor 9 with a flat 5. That's called altered. So you count up 5 notes, so C, D, E, F, G. That's your 5, and then you make that flat, and it becomes G flat. So in other words, here's our C minor 9. And we take that G and we make it a G flat, and that sounds like this. And that is an altered chord, okay, because you're flatting the 5. And there's all kinds of altered chords. A common one is a flat 9, and they occur most commonly in dominant chords. So I'll give you another example. Let's say we have B flat 13, and we flat the 9. So B flat, C, so then the C becomes a B. The flat 9 dominant 13 chords are very common if you listen to, any modern jazz. I mentioned them already, Steps Ahead, Mike Manieri. They use those chords a lot. If you want to hear those, there's a tune called Pools, and you can hear that chord in the beginning. Okay? So these are common. You have to know that. So that's what altered means. You're flatting one of the steps. But it's really easy once you know the regular voicing. All you're doing is moving one note. It's simple. So that's why it's so important to have these memorized, because then all you do is move one thing. And after a while, you even have all the altered chords memorized. And there's no chord you won't know. All right. So last thing I want to do today is a way that I practice these. So again, this may take you a year to get all these memorized. It's a lot of work. And I know when I was younger, I was about 13 years old when I was studying these on piano. Believe it or not, with one of my drum teachers, Jack Winters, who was really awesome. And he, kind of forced me to do this. I really didn't want to do it at first. And it's the best thing that anyone ever did for me was to get me to do that because it's responsible for me doing all this composing and all these other things I do in my life that I never would have done unless I started playing piano, jazz piano with all the voicings. So he really drilled these into me. We really did a lot of this. And, for a while I was playing a lot of piano. I don't have good chops on piano. I don't play in public, but I can play anything harmonically. So one way that we would practice these together, we had 2 pianos in there, or a piano and vibe sometimes as well, is that we would do cycles, in other words, progressions of 2 5s. So I will give you this little exercise that he gave me all these years ago. And I'm sure this is a common thing you could find in some books as well. But we would just do these progressions that would end in a key. So there'd be 2 5s and they'd be moving stepwise. So in other words, you'd have D minor to G, so in the key of C, and then you go to the key of B flat, which would be C to F. Then you go to the key of A flat, which would be B flat to E flat, key of G flat, and so on. And then you'd play all those 2 5s, finally landing on D. So you'd have these 6 different chords, and they would cycle with 2 different progressions, and then you do both those progressions with the different voicings that we have, okay? We'll start on C major, and I'll call these out once again. So again, our 2 chord is D minor, and then our 5 chords G13, and then we'll go to B flat major, and then we have C minor to F13, and then we go to A flat major, and we have B flat minor to E flat 13, and then we go to G flat major. This one's a little tricky, and then we have A flat minor, okay, and then we're going to move that one note, and then we have D flat 13. Now, we don't want to get too low, so now we'll move up to E major, and then F sharp minor is the 2 chord, and the B13, and then we'll go to D major, so the 2 chord of that is E minor 9, and then the dominant chord is A13. And then finally we can play our D major. So that's how I do this. So quickly, a little quicker, you might want to go. sometimes I like to play that 6th chord at the end. All right, so that's how I do it. And I comp, and I do use a metronome on 2 and 4, and I do different rhythms. You could comp like, you know, and just move around like that. The keyboard, play different rhythms. You use the pedal, don't use the pedal, and play with tunes. And that's how you practice. But you need to be fluent. You can't just, you know, sit there and if you don't know them, you can't read them. Okay, you can read the chords. I suggest doing that. And that's what I'm doing here. But I'm not reading the notes. In other words, I'm just reading the chord symbols. All right? So that goes along. The next one would be F major 9. Well, so F major. So the 2 chord of that is G minor to C13. And then F minor in the key of E flat major to B flat 13. And then the key of D flat major is the 2 is E flat minor. And then the dominant is A flat 13. And then the key of B major, the 2 chord is C sharp minor, careful. And then F sharp 13. And the key of A major, the 2 chord is B minor 9. And then E 13 is the 5. And the key of G major, the 2 chord is A minor. And then your D13 is the 5. And then to G major. And that's where we end. All right. So that's how I practice these. And I'll put a couple more on there. There's several types of progressions that you can use to practice these. The ultimate goal is to take out a real book, which is a collection of tunes, jazz tunes. There's several of them. The ones I recommend are the ones published by Share Music, S-H-E-R. There's maybe 5 or 6 of them. There's even a Latin one that's great. And those have all the correct changes, a lot of altered chords, and they even have lyrics, some of them. So, and those books have pretty much every standard and even things that aren't standards, modern tunes, that you can imagine. And then just take those out and play with recording and learn the tunes. And it's really fun. And over time, you will learn all of these. And then you can, you know, then you're really a bona fide musician, okay? Because you're playing chords. And the next step is improvisation. So the next video will deal with scales. And that's where our improvisation is going to come in. So improvisation is a result of 3 things. Number 1, most importantly, listening and transcribing. So that's what I did when I learned how to improvise first. Number 2, knowledge of scales. So in other words, all your modes. So there's lots of modes. We'll go over the ones that are important, and I don't want to overwhelm anyone. But the main scales that we'll do in our next lesson will be major and minor scales, because that's the Ionian and the Aeolian mode. And the minor scales are important for your 2 chords, your minor 2s, which we went over today. The third thing you want to always be cognizant of is what we've done already, is your voicings. Because if you know your voicings, you're halfway there to improvising. You know the chord outline. So a combination of voicings and scales and transcriptions over time and a lot of experience, and obviously feel and rhythm, of course, could make you a really good or maybe someday great improviser. So I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time.